Welcome everybody to the Nile and Cimino Says Bomb Show. I'm your host John, and we are Tuesday Night Live.
Boom! Hey everyone, welcome to POPXP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the POPXP channel.
Hello everybody. We're doing this live due to popular demand. We're sick of you guys talking in front of those pre-recorded episodes and asking us questions and being like, are they live? Are they live? Now, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's going on in issue 59.
Oh man, I'm pumped, man. I'm pumped. But first, make sure everyone that's new to this channel, if you haven't already, look below, click that subscribe button, smash that bell so you get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And John, I'm pretty pumped today though. I just want to share really quick, man. We're getting some press.
What do you want to share?
The POPXP is in the new Overstreet comic book price guide. 2 ads. Look at that. Steven Cimino Says Boom Show. We got Thursday Night Live with Tucci. We got our crowdfunding show. Plus, we got all of our mainstream interviews. I'm pumped to see that, man.
We get a lot of exposure. We're in Overstreet, usually every month, where we got a nice ad in Alter Ego. I'd like everybody to check that out. The Steven Cimino Says Boom Show, the POPXP. And right there's the man. Right here is the man behind it all right there, Niall Scala. Niall, okay. Once again, we're going live, but I don't see somebody. We don't see somebody with us, and we're going to give him a pass. I'll tell you why. I would be like, maybe that's enough for Steve. That's enough. But he was at San Diego Comic-Con. He was trying to be his baby Thanos, all dressed in leather. So right now he's sitting on his couch. He's either sleeping, he's either doing some funky stuff in his spandex, and it's very hot and sweaty. Spandex, and all the shades are pulled down. Who knows? But hey, Steve, if you're out there, we love you, brother. We'll see you on the next one because we don't stop. Because now, tell us about today's guest. We got somebody that's joining us on this live episode.
Yes, and I'm excited because for those that have tuned into so many past episodes of the Steven Cimino Says Boom Show, we've had this guest on a couple times already, and now we have him on live, which we haven't had yet. And again, I mean, we're talking, one of the best editors to hit the comic book scene, writer, publisher, editor-in-chief. I mean, what hasn't this guy done? I think a wise man once said, he's got his hand in a lot of shit,
And let's not forget, he's co-creator of Venom. We're not going to let that slide by. Co-creator. This is probably why Steve didn't show up. Co-creator of the Thanos Copter. That probably he's infamous for that. Writing on that beautiful toilet paper from the 70s that sings soliloquies. Yeah, me too. I got a few of those. The Gamma Gambit. And I know you have one, Niall, but here's a funny thing is, I had a few of them, and I used a few of them too. I used a few. I felt so good. It felt so good. And before we bring the stud out here, the superstar, one of Stan Lee's right-hand men right behind Roy, I just want to say today on Tuesday, the 25th, is my daughter's 19th birthday. Bryn, I love you. I know you're not watching this because I'm not cool, as I think I'm cool, but my daughter doesn't think I'm cool, so this is passe. But I love you and happy birthday. And what a birthday present for bringing out Niall. Let's bring him out, the man, the myth, the legend. We love him. and a lot of people might not, but I do. Thanos Copter, Jim Salicrup.
Welcome, Jim.
Hi there. Where's Steve?
He's diving into the weeds, Jim.
Steve. Oh. Well, at least Roy's going to be here, right?
Only me, you, and Niall. Look, and when you came out, I thought first thing I thought right now was Santa Claus. I just thought
he's bringing gifts, people. He's bringing gifts.
Did anyone ever? Yeah. Did anyone ever ask you to dress up as Santa Claus, Jim?
I have dressed up as Santa Claus, but one of the best Santa Clauses is, are you familiar with the Mick Foley?
Yes.
Yeah, the wrestler.
He loves Santa Clauses. He did a documentary about guys who play Santa Claus at Christmas time, and he had. The documentary showed what they do the rest of the year when they're not Santa, and we got to see Mick, trained to be a Santa, and when we did at Paper Cuts, a WWE comic, it was released around Christmas, and he came to the signing at the Downtown Midtown Comics dressed as Santa. And he had a throne and everything. He was absolutely wonderful. So, I get Santa, Papa Smurf, and good old Colonel Sanders.
Colonel Sanders.
Crystal McGee's in the Christmas spirit.
Trim this. And
we have to say one of the best Stan Lee voices out there. Jim, how long did you work side by side with Stan? Because you were off and on with Stan, and there was something about you that rubbed off on the man. How come he wanted Jim Salicrup by his side? I can see why Roy. I can't tell why Jim, though. Tell me, Jim, why?
Stan would say, I don't know why either. But what he had, when I was at his online adventure, Stanley Media, he sort of had an interesting name for me. He called me the Wart, and I used it to, write a column on the website called the Wart Report. But when he would explain it to other people, he said, Jim is like a wart on my backside. Every time I turn around, there he is. But for those who enjoy Arthurian legends, I think I prefer to believe that was a reference to that, in that, if you recall, Merlin the Wizard would refer to young King Arthur as Wart.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very look at that.
And for those that don't know, you also did some voiceover work in Stan's place, correct?
Yeah, I there was a character Stan created all by himself called the Stan's Evil Clone, or Stan 2.0. It was a little animated thing where I suggested they'd have him in a padded cell, sort of all tied up like Hannibal Lecter, and then Stan would supposedly say funny evil things. And Stan being Stan, he never really wanted the character to say anything bad about anyone. So it was tricky to write a bad character who couldn't say bad things. Stan didn't want to alienate any celebrities that, he might want to work with in the future, for example. And so it was a challenge. Stan got too busy first in the writing of it, and then I took that over. And then he got too busy, couldn't do the voice. And I had to audition for him, and somehow I passed it, or either that or they were too cheap to pay a real voice actor. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, he's a great guy. But going back to your question, I think one of the reasons he put up with me is I think he needed sort of like a straight man, or someone that he could vent his rage at, that knew he was kidding, because he was so busy being nice to everyone else that he needed someone who, to make fun of, so he could just let off some steam. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Say there would be a group of artists, and mostly all male artists, and Stan would enter and say, "Hey men, good afternoon, men. You too, Jim." On and on and on. He was. I loved him, and I think we liked that we could kid around with each other. He let me tease him, and which was a bad example, for other people to see, because when they would try it, it didn't go over well with.
No. That's another thing is Roy could do that too, and Roy could not. That is a very elite class. If you, I don't know anybody else because Roy could give, as you know, Roy could give. Always had Stan's ear, but he could always give Stan pressure. But he would always they'd sometimes. Little here, little quip here. It wasn't just bow down. So it was funny that you're in that class too, though, Jim. That's great. That's good to know. That's a little feather in your cap.
Well, I just he was like a surrogate dad for me, and he knew I unconditionally loved him, and we enjoyed working together, and in general, I understood what he wanted, similar to Roy in that regard. And so a lot of times there would be people who wanted advice on how to prepare their material, for Stan. And there was one guy who became the new president of Stan Lee Media, and he showed me something he wrote for Stan. And, I thought it was fine. I said, the only, suggestion I have is I think he wrote something that Stan was the former publisher of Marvel or something like that. And just like it says over there, the other way, I can't even point to it. There it is, erstwhile. A lot of people don't even know that erstwhile means former. So I told this writer, change former to erstwhile. And no sooner had I said that to him than Stan came running down the hall, told the guy, "This is great." He loved it, heaped some praise on it. He said, "One change former to erstwhile."
Wow.
So from that point on, that guy, kept on me to help him get things approved by Stan.
Jim, I got to ask you. You were involved in so many things, and you were also an editor. Did ever maybe you could have been editor-in-chief? Was that ever kind of in the rumblings in your time there? Were you in a run? I mean, I figured you would be somebody that could actually do that and be there because you were an editor and you looked over. Tell me about that. Do you think? Did you want to be, or did you ever hear rumblings?
Not at Marvel. At Marvel. It would be too much. It was I liked being hands-on. So even though I had the title editor-in-chief at Topps Comics and Paper Cuts, it sort of meant even when I had other editors, I was the editor-in-chief, but I was far more hands-on. I was still, it was closer to, Stan never really used the title during the 60s, editor-in-chief, because, they didn't even mention that they had any other editors.
Right.
But clearly he was. But, I was certainly at both Topps and Paper Cuts, I was very much an editor. I would, every single page would ultimately have to go through me, and then some books I was the editor, and some I was just more supervisory. But that would have been, as Roy would tell you, impossible at Marvel. he just couldn't. They were publishing way too much material to be able to look at every single one. Yeah, he had to just trust the people he had working for him for the most part.
Would you have wanted to do that? Would you have wanted to do it for Marvel or no?
Not really. I enjoyed working on the comics, having to be sort of an administrator and having to deal with business types and all that. I understand them. I like doing it unofficially. There were less consequences, and I had an understanding, for what what they needed when, but to have that, responsibility, it was just, I liked having fun. I liked creating stuff. So no matter where I was, when I was at Marvel, I sort of had my own little piece of the company in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I had my books. For the most part, I was left alone. They gave me a lot of freedom, and I had my own assistants, and I tried to work with the creators and that I enjoyed working with, and usually kept it to a small amount. I wanted to, to be. I was very much trying to recapture that feel Stan had in the 60s, where you had the same writers and artists month after month on the same titles. I wasn't someone who was eager to throw fill-ins in or other artists. On the Spider-Man titles, if there were other artists, they could do a graphic novel or an annual. But on the regular monthly titles, I always like to keep the same creators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Go ahead now. Go ahead.
Now, for the viewers though that aren't familiar with how you got into the industry, could you kind of? I know you've done this in past episodes, but can you just kind of give us, that timeline of how you actually got into comics?
Literally, in terms of working at Marvel. It was when people hear this today, it's especially if they're looking for advice and like, how could I break in? How did you break in, Jim? How did you do it? Oh, I sent a postcard in to Roy Thomas, and then they hired me. That's all there was to it. I don't think that would work today, particularly if they sent it to Roy. But back then, what had happened, there was like, if you were a comics fan, there was fanzines, which I contributed to. There was a magazine called TUCCI'S magazine that I contributed to. It was a newsstand magazine that was created and co-edited by Jeanette Kahn. And, I got like I drew the cover for a national magazine when I was 14 years old. So I had this concept that if you just send stuff in, there's a chance they might respond and they might need you, et cetera, et cetera. So I was planning to go to a high school in Manhattan that many cartoonists and comic book artists went to, the High School of Art and Design. Mm-hmm. And I had to apply to that. But the summer before I was to start high school, that's when Marvel responded to my postcard and asked me to come down to their secret location. And it wasn't 625 like it said in the comic books. It was at 635. 625 was where magazine management was.
Right.
And then once I was there, I was like a pit bull who, once I got my teeth into Marvel's leg, I wasn't letting go for another 20 years.
Wow. What did it, the day before you were walking in there, or like that morning, because have you been to the offices yet? Or was that your first time just showing up because you got a job there and now this is the first time you're in the offices?
I'd been to some conventions and seen some of the people. I was even at I don't know whether it was before or after I started at Marvel, the Stan Lee at Carnegie Hall. And
oh, you were there?
How could I not be? And and then
you were there. Wait. First off, I don't know if you know, but me and Roy sold that costume. I have that Fantastic Four costume downstairs at my house. That the one that Jeannie was wearing. You know, they were wearing on the stage there. Oh, that's so cool. Go ahead. Talk.
Yeah. So there were all these things where I would, anything at all where I could see, cartoonists, comic book people live in New York. I mean, back then it was maybe, July 4th, Phil Suling convention and maybe a few other things. Wasn't that much, Nowadays there's events with comics people, every week somewhere, and even in New York, there'll be events going on where you have to choose. There's so much happening to be on the same night. Oh, do I go to the Mike Mignola exhibit or do I go the other thing? It's tricky. But back then, the idea of like, come on down to Marvel, the best way I can compare that was, as if I was a mere earthling from Midgard, being transported to Asgard and seeing all my comic book gods,
Wow. Yeah.
People. I could still remember there was Steve Gerber, George Russo's, John Romita Sr., Tony Mortallero, Herb Trimpe, Marie Severin, Frank Giacoya, wow. John Verporten, Stan Lee, and of course, Roy Thomas.
Wow. Yeah, those are
That's insane.
I mean,
that's just insane to imagine.
And it was very raw too. Like it was like kind of a niche thing at that time. So like in the outside world, nobody knew those names, but when you were in that convention, everybody knew those guys, and they were making those magic funny books.
I was the ultimate Marvel fan. Stan would be probably joking when he'd write in the bullpen bulletins page, haunt your newsstand for the next month's issue. I couldn't wait. I mean, of course, back then we're talking about, maybe a dozen titles a month. And, even when they were expanding, it wasn't that many. And, I just couldn't wait. I loved all the artwork, the writers, the personality Stan gave, all of it. And, I absolutely loved it. So to suddenly be a part of that was literally a dream come true for me. I couldn't be happier. But, like with every great thing that happens, on my very first day, John Romita Sr. is giving me a tour of the bullpen, and he says, I hope you have a fallback plan. Comics probably won't survive much longer.
They said that to pretty much everybody that got, even in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s.
He believed it, and he had reason. He had good reason to believe it. I mean, back then, the major form of distribution for comics was the, newsstands and mom and pop stores, which were, dying out. And if it wasn't for the direct market to come along and throw a lifeline to the comic book industry, it would have been over.
And what was your first assignment, Jim?
My main job was they were looking to hire a messenger, and Roy very intelligently and wisely understood that they were very understaffed. They were in expansion mode. They had new owners. Cadence Industries had bought them from Martin Goodman, and so they were free of their restrictive distribution deal with independent news. They were with Curtis Circulation. They could come out with as many titles as they want. And they were doing everything they could think of. Let's do black and white magazines. Let's do digests. Let's do, any type of concept at all. And so they were just overloaded and falling behind schedule rapidly because they were expanding so fast, and they had been spending a fortune on hiring messengers to deliver the original artwork to the Comics Code Authority, who had their offices in New York City as well. So imagine this. Marvel hires, obviously, a fan. Like, I was 15-year-old me. And my job was they'd hand me the original artwork in an envelope to bring. I could have, bye. But they trusted me for whatever reason, and I would bring it to, Leonard Darvin down at the Comics Code, offices, and that would save them, time, because, before, back in the 60s, they had the luxury of just sending it through the regular mail to the Comics Code, and they would send it through the mail to the printer in Sparta, Illinois. But, now they needed to speed up the process and, do anything they could to save time and get that work to the printer as soon as possible. So, that was the main thing I would do, but you'll enjoy this, Mr. Cimino. One of my jobs once, and I think you met Carla Conway.
I know her very well. I just texted her today. I just talked to her today.
Well, at that point, she was the latest of many of Stan Lee's. Back then, they said secretaries. Now would be personal assistant, and it was, I think, after hours. And here I am, a teenager, and Carla grabs me by my arm and pulls me into Stan's office and says, "Promise not to laugh." I don't know what's going on. She says, "You have to pick up this package for Stan." Okay. I was like a messenger, so that wasn't, what was so funny? I don't know. And I go to this place. It was in a brownstone, a townhouse. And I've never seen a real place like this, where they have those doors with the little door and
the little peep window thing there.
Yeah, the little window.
Yeah. It's like, what's the code?
I'm 15.
Brown
I'm here to pick up a package for Mr. Lee. Some gangster type guy looks out. "You don't look Chinese." I didn't say that. He said that. And anyhow, they give me a package, a box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. And I bring it back to the office. It was Stan's toupee.
Now, wait, how did you know? Did you see him open it?
Carla told me.
Yeah, sure.
Then Stan gave me a big thanks at the end of the night.
Oh, man.
The new head of hair.
My God. But to go back, when Marvel was expanding, now there's a reason why those comics are so legend, like the 60s and 70s, especially that early 70s too. I mean, people were, you guys, you artists, the writers and the artists just had to make magic. There wasn't really much restriction. So you guys.
At that point, I was still like.
No, right.
Behind the scenes, like there were lots of artists and writers doing all sorts of great things, and I had a great. It's like, what was that movie? Almost Famous.
Oh yeah.
Where instead of being around all these rock stars, I was around all these comic book people, watching them do stuff. So it was incredible. I loved it.
Yeah, just seeing it so raw, and it's kind of a mom and pop shop at that time too. It just, that was such, now how it's so corporate and so plastic and all that stuff. But I'm just saying, but you see that in the product. And that started happening in the, because you were there in the 90s too, like when it was just kind of like, it just wasn't as raw, it was more like conveyor belt type stuff.
Yeah, I was there from 72 to 92, a wonderful 20 years. It was very educational. I got to see, how all this happens and why it happens. And people like Stan and Roy were truly instrumental in doing things and making things that made it possible, to keep growing the audience, and that inspired others to, follow in their footsteps. One of the odd things when you talk about Marvel now is, people just think of it as nothing but superheroes. But back in the early 70s, there wasn't anything they wouldn't try. I mean, Stan even tried doing an underground comic with, they did all sorts of, they did anything that was popular. Planet of the Apes, they'll do that. They had Westerns, war, monsters, any kind of comic you could think of, they were trying to do it. Humor magazines, horror magazines, science fiction. It was a great time to be there. There was lots of opportunity. And
so why did it stop though? Like, what was the downfall of trying all these new avenues? Was it just not clicking with readers?
I think it happened more because Stan eventually moved on to the West Coast. Mm-hmm. I think Stan's instincts remained the same, but I think a lot of people going into comics were so obsessed with wanting to do the superheroes that whenever that other stuff would fall by the wayside, they wouldn't want to try other things. The first full comic I edited, after being reprint editor of the British weeklies, all sorts of other things. But when I was, I spent some time as Roger Stern's assistant editor. And when he went freelance, I was promoted and took over all his titles, which was probably as many titles as Stan was editing during the 60s. Not during the 50s when it was like a ton of titles, but, it was Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, Marvel 2-in-1, the X-Men, Marvel Premiere, Marvel Spotlight, Rawhide Kid, Marvel Treasury Edition, Marvel Tales. I mean, it was just a lot of stuff. And it was, quite an experience. But the first title that I edited as a full editor was Marvel Premiere number 50. And the first thing I tried to do was, find a new audience. We did an Alice Cooper comic book.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It's funny because David Anthony Kraft and I and Ed Hannigan, we all wanted to do an Alice Cooper comic years before. And it was actually a point where Marvel was approached to do it, but none of us, Dave, myself, and Ed, were in any position to make that happen. So years later, the group KISS was almost, became successful in that period where Alice Cooper was in rehab, and a void was sort of, created in the rock world for theatrical rock stars. And who knew that Gene Simmons was a big comics fan, and he approached Stan and wanted there to be a KISS comic. And after Stan at that point, this goes back to not wanting to be the editor-in-chief. Stan was like the publisher, and in some ways he was powerless. The people he had working for them, all well-intentioned, whoever the editor-in-chief was, but it was almost like a factory. They could keep churning out comic books, but whenever he tried to do something else, it would fall by the wayside. People didn't know, Stan's another crazy idea from Stan. And at this particular point, Steve Gerber, the creator of Howard the Duck, had, Stan was paying attention to him, and he loved that, a new character was getting so much attention, and he
president. President.
That was, we did the buttons and everything. We had a little company called Mad Genius Associates, and it was at a dinner, again, late hours, where David Anthony Kraft, myself, and Gerber Gerber was relating his latest meeting with Stan that day, and almost as an aside was, oh, Stan had this crazy idea to do a comic based on Kiss. Now, Steve didn't know that Dave and Ed and I wanted to do an Alice Cooper comic, so he thought, oh, this could be the way in. And we said, you got to do it. And, Steve was more of a Beatles fan, and, he was a little too old to be the right generation to truly appreciate Kiss. I think my younger brother was the right age. But so anyhow, we talked him into it. He had them appear in Howard the Duck to, help promote it.
13.
And it was like this Marvel Super Special. It was a magazine, which was Gene's idea. He saw that there were all these other magazines at the time, rock magazines, that always had Kiss on the cover. So he thought, let's do it as a magazine next to those, so Kiss fans will see it. And the traditional thinking in publishing back then was you have to publish a magazine for at least a year before it just breaks even. You got to, it takes a while to build an audience. Like that Kiss magazine, printed in real Kiss blood, went into it sold out almost immediately. And because it was so well promoted, there was a flyer in all the Kiss albums that were out at the time promoting that comic. There was literally, the fan club was called the Kiss Army. So it was like, it was all these, this was exciting to see this potential to, reach other audiences. But, it varied. Most of the people who wound up working for Marvel, to them, something different would be, we'll do sword and sorcery, we'll do science fiction. It was all sort of basically adventure, stuff for guys. It wasn't, they weren't really trying to reach too many others, but it varies. Over the years, they did try to do other things. But then when they did, it would be, it was insane. It's like when Marvel, like now this past weekend, one of the biggest movie of the week was Barbie, and Marvel had published a Barbie comic, and they had the best intentions, but it was, you'd see these subscription ads, Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man, Conan, Barbie. It's like, who's gonna, and if you looked at the average comic book store back then, what little girl was thinking, oh, let's go in there,
Right. It was more of a boy.
They have any Barbie comics, it's just, it was like, things had to change, and which ultimately it did. And now it's like, if anything, the comics for girls and kids and, are now doing better than all that superhero stuff. Who'd imagine that?
Yeah.
Hey, little fun fact, when you were talking about Gene Simmons, now this will be interesting for you to know too, that in the late 60s or very early 70s, that you know how Gene Simmons was doing, he made a couple of fanzines. He made a couple of do you know he got together with Marv Wolfman before Marv? Is that's true, right? That's true, Jim? Yeah.
No, Gene Simmons was published under his real name of Gene Klein back then. Yeah. And Marv knew him,
Yeah, and I guess they were going to do a fanzine together, but it never panned out or something like that. But
they might have done an article or something, and it's like, Gene has this, encyclopedic memory, for particularly 60s Marvel stuff, where you could say whatever, and like, when did the Inhumans first appear? And that was FF number blah blah blah. Yeah. So he loved it, and obviously, whereas Alice Cooper was sort of taking, making his show sort of like a a theatrical horror, show. Gene went with the we'll be these rock and roll superheroes, and so it worked.
Go ahead now.
Yeah, so I got a couple of questions here from the audience that I want to pop up, if you don't mind. There's about 3 of them here. A lot of them kind of on the same theme of how can we improve Marvel today. So the first question we got is from some person. Hello, Jim. What advice would you give current Marvel writers?
Well, generally, I would do that if Marvel was to hire me as an editor or a consultant, and then I'd do it. But I think there's plenty of fun comics coming from Marvel and different things. I don't think it's so much the writers or the artists or any of that. I think the biggest problem both DC and Marvel are facing is, a diminishing audience, by publishing comics that are so expensive and I mean, just the amount of superhero comics tends to be unbelievable, and each one is like anywhere from $3 to $5. It's I don't know how sustainable a business plan that is. It's so when you go to these conventions now, like San Diego or New York Comic Con or Terrificon, where I'll be at this weekend, what's fun to find out is that there are lots of young people who are into the movies or the TV shows, which only, if you think about it, like you could stream for roughly around $10 every month, hundreds of TV shows and movies. Whereas that same $10 is going to get you what, 3 comic books, 4 maybe if you're really lucky.
2 or 3 depending on what you're buying. Yeah.
So it's I think that's the bigger question. I mean, I think throughout any age of comics, there's always been some really great comics and great creators, and there's always been a lot of average stuff, good stuff, nothing wrong with that, and some horrible stuff, like it's just normal. And I'm amazed at how many great comics there are being published and the variety of how many different things are out there. There's lots of amazing talents and writers, and you're seeing so much material that does well in comics, and then a few years later it's a TV series. It's great.
Mm-hmm. And then we got another question here from this one's from my homie Ellie Muniz. I'm curious as to Salicrup's relationship to Jim Shooter and Mark Grunwald. Was there ever a reason for their firing? Huge fan of 80s Marvel bullpen.
I can't answer definitively. I didn't even realize. I didn't think Mark was fired. I thought he passed away. Wasn't he still working for Marvel?
Yeah, he was still working for Marvel when he passed, right, John?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and and Jim's someone who can best address whatever his relationship was at Marvel better than I could. I personally, liked both of them. Both the incredibly smart, talented people. They had different strengths. Jim, incredibly hard worker, really great writer. Over the years, I think I've actually, have more admiration for Shooter's writing now than I did when I was actually working with him as his editor. It's like in recent years, I've been asked by Marvel to write introductions to various Marvel masterworks where I might have been either assistant editor or editor. And on some of those were Avengers with some material by Jim. And it's interesting to develop a perspective on the material. I mean, I may have edited that, 30 years ago, and to come back and look at it, I think I have a better sense of how good it is now, because I think when I was working on it, an editor is always trying to fix things, like this could be better, and this isn't what, this could, you wind up seeing all the mistakes. Mm-hmm. And you're just trying to, meet the deadline, make everything as good as you possibly could within the time you have, and move on to the next issues. So, and Mark was someone who, if you talk to any of the people from Marvel who worked with him, they absolutely loved him, and he was unique, and then I can't think of anyone else who literally had photos of the editorial staff, each member, all his fellow editors, on his wall in his home. I think everyone else, myself included, you almost wanted that separation of church and state. Like when I'm in the office, I'm 100%, behind Marvel and doing everything I can. But when I go home, it's about family and friends and and like you don't want to think about it, so you could refresh and come back, ready to tackle whatever it is you have to do. But he was just had a big heart, very, very smart, and cared about not only his fellow editors, but every single character in the Marvel universe. So, everyone, no matter what the circumstances, we can't, work there forever, so there's usually a beginning and end to, all of our times at Marvel. So I just tend to look at it as, we have to appreciate the material they did when they were there, and not dwell on stuff like what made them leave or what have you.
Yeah, and I'll do one more question, and then I'll hand it back to you, John. And Oliver Viller, hi Jim. Since the Alice Cooper comic was inspired by his album From the Inside, I was wondering what were your favorite tracks of the album?
Whoa,
that's interesting. That was a strange album, in that one of Alice's great strengths is he's an incredible lyricist, and that album was unique in that he co-wrote it with Bernie Taupin, Elton's lyricist, and it was really good. What was my favorite? I'm not a favorite type of guy, but it's probably just for fun. I like Cold Ethel. That was a fun song. Had a lot of great songs in it.
Wow. Is that all you got now?
Yeah, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. Well, Jim, you know what I want to get straight now? At the beginning of this, there's two things I want to talk about with you, definitely. But let's get on right now. We talked about this on the last time you were on the podcast, but now that we're live, I want
peace and love. Sorry.
Peace and love. Tell us why you're the forgotten co-creator of Venom. It bothers me, because you should be on the co-create. I know you said with, but you are a co-creator of Venom. Tell the story, so let the people understand what happened. Because before you answer, the thing that people don't understand about comics, it's very malleable. Sometimes people think when you talk to people about that are outside of comics, it's like, oh, it's co-created by this guy, and this guy. They think it's so black and white, but they don't realize how things work back. So sometimes people put in an idea or do stuff and they get forgotten, or they're just not mentioned on a certain comic when they should have been, blah, 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 blah. Case in point, I know back then you guys, it didn't really matter. Oh, it's okay. But nowadays, like, for instance, Roy should have been he plotted out Tomb of Dracula. They forgot to put his name on it. whatever. He's the plotter on Giant Size X-Men #1 too. Len forgot to do it at the time. Who cares? But I'm just saying that's just kind of how it was back then. And so people get lost in the mix sometimes. Tell us about Venom and let the fans know once and for all why you're the co-creator of Venom.
Well, my answer may be shorter than your question, but
okay.
the main thing is whenever you're dealing with a big organization, it's hard to come up with systems that will apply to every single situation. So Marvel at that point, and it's great. It's a great program. Had a new character incentive program designed, and it made sense in that it was designed to reward writers and artists with coming up with new characters. Because I would say probably 99% of the time they're the ones who would come up with new characters. Roy and other editors sometimes would do, I don't want to compare, the amount of work I did to what, say, Roy did, involving Wolverine or so many other characters he helped come up with while he was on staff. So to be clear, what happened was we had planned an issue, 300, where the big thing was going to be, Spider-Man returning to the red and blue costume. When I told the new editor-in-chief, Tom DeFalco, that was the big plan for issue 300, he didn't think that was enough. He wanted a major new Spider-Man villain to be introduced, which is like, yeah, sure. Hello, Michelini, introduce a major new Spider-Man villain. I did a little bit more than that. And, since it was already, we were already, doing this thing, which I wanted to return to the red and blue. I tend to be a very traditional guy in that regard. And a lot of it was based on my thinking that the black and white costume, I'm just old fashioned in the sense that it looked like a villain to me. I didn't like the idea that Spider-Man was trying to go darker. This was around, post 1986, where
right.
You had Frank Miller doing, Daredevil and Dark Knight, and there was Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, and this became the thing to do these dark villains and dark superheroes rather, and I thought, it was turning Spider-Man into a second-rate version of Daredevil, which was counter to the 60s, where they would think Daredevil was a second-rate version of Spider-Man.
Right.
So I thought, let's get back to the red and blue. What I wanted to do was make Spider-Man as much Spider-Man as possible. So when we ran into this, well, that can't be all you do, trying to think of something that would be related to the theme so we didn't have to totally go back, to the beginning. Well, what if we take that costume and put it on a villain? And, with a little bit of back and forth between myself, Tom DeFalco, and Michelini, that became the new plan. So my co-creation was really suggesting, let's take that alien costume, let's take it off Spider-Man, let's make it a big, nasty, supervillain. But the actual work, the lion's share, the real hard figuring out all the details, naming the character, was the writer, David Michelini. I don't want to take anything away from him. The visual depiction was Todd McFarlane. And so I would say I contributed. I don't know if I should call myself a co-creator, but I was involved with the creation of the character. There are a lot of people who also point out, like would any of this be in existence if there wasn't for Spider-Man in the first place, created by Stan and Steve? And then there was the black costume suggested by some fan, I can't remember who, and then that was designed by someone else, and it was these stories by Jim Shooter and Secret Wars and Tom DeFalco and whoever else in Amazing Spider-Man. So it's very tricky assigning credit, obviously, and this is as true of anything else. Once something is a big success, what is the saying? Success has a million fathers, and failure is an orphan.
But the way the world works in that stuff is like the way fans work on the outside. Like I said, how they when you talk Venom, they think it's just Todd McFarlane. Even Michelini, he had a little problem with that. And when he came public with see, you guys suffer. I just want to go back here. You guys suffer from the fact that you guys should have been more vocal about this stuff. Obviously, you were just creating stuff. You just didn't think of it. But then when Michelini came out and he started talking about Venom, I saw him go online and he was throwing, he was stating about there's so much McFarlane. I did all this, and this. I saw the backlash he got. He got backlash from fans because McFarlane was smart. He always, because one, he drew it, so he's going to have that connection that you see that before you see the words. But the thing is he's so vocal about his stuff that he gets into the psyche of the fans. So when a quiet guy like Michelini, who just really didn't care at the time, and now it matters. So what I'm saying is that so when he comes back out, it's kind of like, wait, you did what? No, you didn't. That was McFarlane. And then so with you, but this is what we do here. This is what we do on.
Well, it's important, for me to be clear that I don't want to take anything away.
Oh, of course
from
not.
Michelini and McFarlane. They are the co-creators.
Of course.
I think I had a hand in it. That's why I suggested maybe you could say co-created by them with me. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, but it's just it's funny when you mention this. There's a very talented artist, Sam De La Rosa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know Sam.
And when he's at conventions, I think he inked some of the original Venom miniseries.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you go to his booth, it's like Venom Town. Yeah. He's got a Venom T-shirt on. He's got Venom posters. He got Venom prints. It's Venom. It's like, that's wonderful. I mean, he did, he did ink those miniseries. I'm not taking anything away from him, but I find it, amusing, because it's one of these things. I remember, I think I told this the last time, when the first movie was opening, I was going to work at Paper Cuts. I come out of the subway and I look across the street, and on the whole back of a newsstand is a big poster for Venom. And then almost like the opening of Sex and the City, a bus pulls in front of me, and the whole side of the bus was a big ad for Venom. And I'm thinking, wasn't that my idea?
But you see, though, that Sam De La Rosa, I hate to say it, he knows what he's doing because.
I agree. I don't hold it against him. He's a great guy.
No, absolutely. But what I'm
smart.
saying is, but this is the fault of a lot of you guys from the 70s and.
Ooh.
Oh.
I'm such an advocate for Roy.
See how I froze him there?
But I like to push.
Tell me more about the fault of the guys from that.
but I want to make sure that because you guys don't see how we see it on the other end. But like, there's much money to be made. But now sometimes when people come out too late, the backlash can be strong. But anyways, I just want people to know that you did have a hand in that, and like.
Well,
and now,
I want to resolve it with Marvel and do it in a way that's fair to everyone. I don't want to I don't want to take one penny away from Michelini or McFarlane. I just want to work something out that will work for everyone. So,
but Jim, it's your legacy. That's what we're talking about. It's not money. It's the credit. It's the legacy.
That's why I'm writing my book.
Yeah. Now here's number 2.
Didn't you finally get Roy to write a book too?
He's on it now. He's doing it.
He's going to beat me to it. He's so fast. Okay.
Yeah. He's just getting into Marvel right now. Like so. Yeah. So he's got it. Well, here's number 2, Mr. Salicrup, the Thanos Copter. Tell me the coke now. Now you should be taking credit for that. Tell me the whole idea with that. Why, how, and it's stuck no matter what. It's like a wart.
A lot of times, David Anthony Kraft and I would, help each other out on writing stuff, meeting deadlines. Together we were Mad Genius Associates with, when we had that office with Steve Gerber during the Howard the Duck days and all that. So, whether it was the toilet paper or Spidey Super Story, I mean, David Anthony Kraft also would work with folks like Dwight John Zimmerman and Roger Slifer and, help. I mean, even, Don McGregor and Steve. I think McGregor is the purist. And I think that he would write every single word that that's in his comics, but he would sometimes help the other writers, anonymously. And like we would all do that. We ghost write things for each other. So I can't, not give credit to David Anthony Kraft when it comes to the Thanos Copter.
Really?
Well, a lot of it's because in my stories and Spidey Super Stories, I would do some silly things. I think I had Spidey and Captain, what's his name? Captain Britain battling, Dr. Octopus on the tennis court. Where Doc has a tennis racket in each hand, or I would do silly things, but a lot of times there was even one story I adapted from Roy. It was a Submariner story with Namorita in it, and I gave him credit in that issue, and in a way I was like trying to keep it, I don't know how to explain it, maintain the integrity of all these characters. I think it was, and Dave, I think, just saw how absurd it was anyway, that, the whole concept of a comic book series that, we all read when we were kids, and now we're adapting it into a comic for kids. It was just silly. And I think Dave's sense of humor was to push that a lot more. And, the way people would make jokes like, why don't you have Spidey deal with some super serious subject matter? And so in a sense, that's what he was doing by bringing, the god of death into Spidey Super Stories. There's no way we could have done we could have done it, but it wouldn't have been published. Right. Here's Thanos presented straight in Spidey Super Stories. No, the idea was to just have fun with it and be silly. And what could be crazier than a Thanos Copter and, him being arrested at the end by cops? Like, it was just...
shoved into the paddy wagon. It's great.
Yeah, it was just, there was no sense that these stories were part of real Marvel continuity. It was almost, at best, it was, just to have fun stories. It was ahead of its time in trying to be inclusive. if you look at all the issues of Spidey Super Stories, I mean, it had an editorial board at CTW that was all women, and they were always pushing to have all these other, female characters. I mean, the first story I wrote after I took over from Gene Thomas features Storm, which covered, there's a female character, a black character. So they were very conscious of trying to do that. So in the Thanos Copter story, I think, Dave wanted to be a part of it because he was the writer on Defenders at the time, and he really enjoyed writing the Hellcat character.
Right.
I think we called her just the Cat in Spidey Super Stories. But, so it was just something we were having fun and didn't think anyone would notice. I mean, that's so the fact that it's become so well known and that they're actual toys that I still haven't gotten any.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
I don't mind, but whatever. It just goes. But it's great to see. I mean, one other weird thing just happened. I was mentioning to you earlier. There's this show with starring Arnold Schwarzenegger called FUBAR on, I think it's, what is it, Netflix or Max? I don't know. And one of the characters is a comics fan. And what was reflected in it is that all these things that I may not have gotten an initial reaction to when it was originally published, wait 30 years or so, and then suddenly it becomes part of pop culture and it pops up everywhere. And so in the the last episode of the first season of FUBAR, there's a character who's expressing why he loves this other character. And he's saying, oh, it was like, I mean, they established he's a comic book fan. And he says, it was like when I first got Amazing Spider-Man 289 and I saw Todd McFarlane's artwork. And it was like nothing I had ever seen before. And he's like, I'm watching this and I'm thinking, I edited that comic. That's now it's part of Arnold's TV show. So it's you never know where these things will pop up. It's amazing. So I'm not surprised, but it's like every thing I would have never imagined, like, they're actually becoming toy Thanos helicopters, or the Marvel announced that they're coming out with an omnibus of Marvel Age, something I edited for 8 years at Marvel. There's a lot of things where within the company, there would be people that may not have approved of certain things. Probably the best example was, the wedding of Mary Jane and Peter Parker. I thought Mary Jane was an important character, and and I sort of, I tend not to worry about what other people do after I leave a series or something. But, there was always this anti-Mary Jane faction going on. And then when I got to see the very first Spider-Man movie, and the opening scene is Peter rushing after the bus, to go to high school or whatever. And Mary Jane's in the bus, and his voiceover is saying, this is a story about a girl. And, this girl, and it's about Mary Jane, how important, that movie recognized how she was. So it's sort of like so many times what the approval that I didn't get at Marvel, I would get years later, either in Hollywood or, people coming up to me saying how much they loved whatever it was we did in our books. The biggest thing, there were so many people who dismissed the success of Spider-Man, #1 by Todd McFarlane, as, that was just speculators. Whoever wrote that scene and FUBAR, I think more accurately, describes what the feeling was for a generation of kids who absolutely adore, and love Todd McFarlane's work. It was a real thing. It wasn't, oh, I'm buying this because, it's going to be worth a lot of money. There was some of that, of course, but I think a lot of it was the real excitement the fans had at that time for his work and, what was going on with Amazing and all the other Spider-Man titles. So some little throwaway line in a TV show like that, where, it was like a big deal to that character, I enjoy seeing that.
No, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Okay, we're going to wind this down now. We got some last stuff we got through?
Yeah, we got a couple questions here. This one's from L Comic Box. Did you come out in a cover of Web of Spider-Man? You were taking a picture of Mary Jane?
Well, I didn't come out, but I was on a cover.
Oh, you were?
Web of Spider-Man. It was Alex Saviuk's idea. At the time, this will tell you how long ago it was, Vanna White had done a pictorial in Playboy magazine where she was.
Okay, I remember that. I remember
lingerie, and
that was a big deal.
And we had Mary Jane as a model, and I thought, oh well, maybe she's going to do what happens if she's being asked to do a lingerie shoot, for some men's magazine or whatever, and so we had the story written like that, and I remember. For the cover, I wanted, Alex Saviuk was the Web of Spider-Man artist. He penciled it. And I figured because it was Mary Jane, we got to get John Romita Sr. to ink the cover. And it was the most demure, modest, Mary Jane wearing almost like this old-fashioned granny negligee. And but within the company, there were people who were outraged at it. As people in the sales department were upset that the cover had implied nudity. I can't believe them. But it was Alex's idea, since I was the one pushing for all this, he figured, I'll make Jim the photographer. So there I am on that cover of Web of Spider-Man. I have a few appearances in the Spider-Man books here and there. I think the other one was Eric Larson, because I had pushed. I didn't kill off too many characters. Craven was one, and Nathan Lubinsky was another one. He was this sort of friend of Aunt May's, and it just it just didn't seem necessary for me. You already had Aunt May. You didn't need another old person. And so since I pushed to get rid of them, there was a scene on a splash page that Eric Larson drew where you're looking up from the grave of Nathan, and in the background amongst the mourners at his burial site, Eric drew me.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Okay. We'll do one more question
I
now.
got one more here. From Parker, look, what's that? Matt Bird. Jim, do you believe that making long-lasting superheroes into villains is a great thing? Because right now it seems as if all of Marvel Comics heroism isn't in any comic, but because all heroes are evil.
Wow. Great picture, too.
Well, I don't know about that. I must have missed that when all the heroes became evil. I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, Venom is sort of a villain who sometimes does some good things, but Spider-Man's still a good guy. I can't say I understand the question really. Because all heroes are evil? No.
Yeah, I think what he's saying, like, the heroism now today is a lot darker than it was back then. Like back in the 70s, you could really distinguish. You knew who a superhero was, and today there's a lot of black and white. There's a lot of gray. You know, it's not black and white. I mean, it's a lot of gray. And
but that's like describing what Stan, was talking about all along about the Marvel. I mean, you go back to the very first Marvel comic, Marvel Comics #1. You had the Submariner. He's someone that would attack the surface world, over and over and over again. So, in the 60s, Marvel, what Stan would talk about was, and it's hard for people who've only been reading comics the last 10, 20, 30 or so years, that before the 60s, the heroes were totally white bread, totally good, drink milk, never go into a bar, just totally wholesome, good characters. And nothing wrong with that. That's just how it was. But Stan's, more than the artist, his contribution to the Marvel Universe was to give these characters, make the heroes have problems, have the villains have noble qualities, just adding a little bit more characterization and adding a little bit more depth to them. So over the years, as writers, keep trying to add more and more depth and, what have you to the characters, it turns into what we're talking about. In 86, you had I think that's when you had that attempt to darken characters. But even when that happened, the Watchmen were originally supposed to be the Charlton characters, and Dick Giordano was protective of them. No, heaven forbid we make these Charlton characters remotely interesting. I'm kidding. And instead they said, here, make them these new characters. And that's okay. Even within Spider-Man, you've had a lot of characters have become very dark. Stan, when he read the Craven's Last Hunt stuff, said he never would have written a Spider-Man story like that, but he respected it for what it was. And, to me, what I was just saying before about the whole Venom thing is I wanted to keep Spider-Man a hero. And I still pick up Amazing Spider-Man, and I don't see anything in there that indicates, he's not a good guy. It's challenging, when you have characters that have been around this long, coming up with new things, new wrinkles, new sides to them. It's tricky. I think sometimes I disagree with Marvel sort of fibbing to the audience, like say when Captain America was what was he, a Hydra agent or something?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
There are lots of ways around that, but I think sort of actually lying to the fans, no, this is all real or what have you, is maybe taking it a little too far. But I don't know all the details. Maybe I'm misjudging it. So, but it seems that's always been a plot device since the beginning of superhero comics. Oh, Superman's gone bad. But ultimately, I think they're all still good guys. And
wow, look at that.
Unless I missed something. I don't think Spider-Man's killed anyone lately, has he?
Has he, Niall?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I don't think so. He's still. And with that,
just don't be his friend, because that could be.
And with that, we got. Thank you, Jim, for coming live. Here's a little tidbit we just learned. Jim Salicrup still collects Spider-Man. Is that true, Jim? You still pick up Spider-Man?
Yeah.
That's cute. That's adorable. It's adorable.
I go to the comic book store every Wednesday, and there's tons of stuff that I keep buying.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like I won't live long enough to read everything, but I enjoy seeing it. It's an interesting thing.
It's adorable. Jim Salicrup still collects his comic books. I love it. Well, thank you, Jim, so much for showing up. We'd like to thank everybody for giving us your questions and stuff.
Thank you,
Niall, you think we see Steve next week, or what do you think?
I hope so.
I think Steve, because of the Spider-Man nature of the show, was pulling a Steve Ditko.
Oh, nice. I like that.
And he's lost in the weeds. He's
lost in the weeds.
All right, now get us out of here. Thank you, Jim.
Boom.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on POPXP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the POPXP and over on Instagram at the POPXP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.